Lesson 45. The power of the press. We'll talk about the power of the press in this text. Now first, listen and then answer this question. Does the author think the parents were lucky or unlucky to gain prosperity in this way? Why? 作者认为这家父母这样富裕起来是幸运还是不幸运？为什么？
In democratic countries, any efforts to restrict the freedom of the press are rightly condemned. However, this freedom can easily be abused. Stories about people often attract far more public attention than political events. Though we may enjoy reading about the lives of others, it is extremely doubtful whether we would equally enjoy reading about ourselves. Acting on the contention that facts are sacred, reporters can cause untold suffering to individuals by publishing details about their private lives. Newspapers exert such tremendous influence that they can not only bring about major changes to the lives of ordinary people, but can even overthrow a government. The story of a poor family that acquired fame and fortune overnight dramatically illustrates the power of the press. The family lived in Aberdeen, a small town of 23,000 inhabitants in South Dakota. As the parents had 5 children, life was a perpetual struggle against poverty. They were expecting their 6th child and were faced with even more pressing economic problems. If they had only had one more child, the fact would have passed unnoticed. They would have continued to struggle against economic odds and would have lived in obscurity. But they suddenly became the parents of quintuplets, 4 girls and a boy, an event which radically changed their lives. The day after the birth of the 5 children, an aeroplane arrived in Aberdeen, bringing 60 reporters and photographers. The rise to fame was swift. Television cameras and newspapers carried the news to everyone in the country. Newspapers and magazines offered the family huge sums for the exclusive rights to publish stories and photographs. Gifts poured in not only from unknown people, but from baby food and soap manufacturers who wished to advertise their products. The old farmhouse the family lived in was to be replaced by a new $500,000 home. Reporters kept pressing for interviews, so lawyers had to be employed to act as spokesmen for the family at press conferences. While the 5 babies were still quietly sleeping in oxygen tents in a hospital nursery, their parents were paying the price for fame. It would never again be possible for them to lead normal lives. They had become the victims of commercialization, for their names had acquired a market value. Instead of being 5 new family members, these children had immediately become a commodity.
So does the author think that the parents were lucky or unlucky to gain prosperity in this way? Right. He thinks that the parents were unlucky to gain prosperity in this way, because the family would never lead normal lives again. So this text is about the power of the press, just as the title goes. The example of the family supports this theme. The press changes not only the economic life of the family, but the living style, and the future fate of the newborn quintuplets would also be changed. The first paragraph is an introduction about why the press has such a power. The reason is the freedom of the press, which is often abused. So, from the example of this family, the author shows that the freedom of the press, just as any other kinds of freedom, should be restricted. In this way, we can say this text is more about the abuse of the power of the press. Okay, now we'll look at some language points in this text. In democratic countries, any efforts to restrict the freedom of the press are rightly condemned. To restrict means to limit. I'll give you more examples. The new law restricts freedom of speech. 新法律限制言论自由。The government is considering measures to restrict the sale of cigarettes. 限制香烟的销售。Are rightly condemned. Condemned means criticized here. It can also mean punish. Look at these examples. The terrorist action has been condemned as an act of barbarism. 恐怖主义的活动被谴责为一种野蛮行径。The prisoner was condemned to death. Here condemned means was punished to death. 被判死刑。This freedom can easily be abused. Abuse, 滥用。For example, the mayor abused his authority or his position to give jobs to his relatives and friends. 市长滥用职权，把职位给了亲友。Some of these children had been physically or emotionally abused. Here, abuse means mistreat. 这些孩子受到了身体上或者情感上的虐待。It is extremely doubtful whether we would equally enjoy reading about ourselves. Doubtful means uncertain or unlikely. 它后边经常跟上 whether or if 引导的从句。For example, he was doubtful whether he should accept the offer. 他不肯定是否应该接受这项工作。It was doubtful whether or if the money would ever be found again. Here it means it was quite unlikely. 这个钱能找到已经是不太可能的事情。Acting on the contention that. Contention here means opinion. In different contexts, it can also mean disagreement. Look at these two examples. Her contention is that exercise is more important than diet if you want to lose weight. Here contention means her opinion. 她的意见是锻炼比节食更重要，如果想减肥的话。The issue is still in contention. Contention in this sentence means disagreement. 这件事情还在争论当中。Facts are sacred. Sacred originally means religiously respected. 神圣的。We have learned this sentence before. In the most sacred room of the temple, clay fragments of 15 statues were found. Here, sacred means religiously most respected. We can also use sacred to mean extremely important, as the text goes. For example, human life is sacred. 人的生命是神圣的。But sometimes we can use sacred to simply ironically mean very important. For example, his daily routine is sacred to him. 他的日常习惯对他来说非常重要。It carries a meaning of irony. Can cause untold suffering. Untold means too much to be expressed or measured. I'll give you two more examples. The earthquake has caused untold misery to the people in this area. 非常大的灾难。The scandal has done untold damage to her reputation. 巨大的损失、损害。The story of a poor family that acquired fame and fortune overnight. Acquire means obtain. Here it means to obtain very suddenly. It appears again later in the text. They had become the victims of commercialization, for their names had acquired a market value. Acquire here means obtain with efforts. dramatically illustrates the power of the press. Dramatically 很戏剧化的。Look at two more examples. Quite dramatically, she shrugged and shook her head. Here, it means quite exaggeratingly. 非常夸张的做了这么一个动作。Your life changes dramatically when you have a baby. Dramatically here means radically, changes very much. Illustrates the power of the press. Illustrate means explain. Look at these examples to see how to use illustrate. The latest conflict further illustrates the weakness of the UN. 最近的冲突呢，进一步表明了联合国的软弱。Illustrate 后边可以直接加名词。The speaker illustrates his point with a diagram. 这个讲话的人用一幅图来解释他的观点。We can use illustrate with something. A recent survey illustrates that the media has played a very important role in education. We can also use illustrate to follow a that clause. 最近的调查表明，媒体对教育的作用非常重大。Life was a perpetual struggle against poverty. Perpetual means an everlasting struggle against poverty. For example, he lived in perpetual fear of being discovered and arrested. 他生活在被发现和逮捕的永久的恐惧当中。A perpetual struggle against poverty. I'll give you more examples. The nation's struggle for independence. 这个国家为独立进行的斗争。The struggle between good and evil. 善恶之间的斗争。After a struggle with the robber, the police officer managed to arrest him. A struggle with 和这个人的搏斗。Struggle can also be used as a verb. The text gives us an example. They would have continued to struggle against economic odds. They were expecting their sixth child. Expect here means they were expecting a baby or being pregnant. For example, he was overjoyed to learn that his wife was expecting or was expecting a baby. With even more pressing economic problems. Pressing here means urgent. We can also say a pressing need, or a pressing issue, or a pressing question. Look at this example. There is a pressing need for reform in this area. 这个地区急需进行改革。In this example, however, their invitation is so pressing that I can do nothing but accept. Pressing means eager or anxious. 他们的邀请如此迫切，我只好接受。The fact would have passed unnoticed. Pass here serves as a semi-link verb. So unnoticed is an adjective following it. I'll give you more examples. He went away unobserved. 这里也是用动词 go 后边加上过去分词变成了形容词。Or I returned home exhausted. Return here also serves as a semi-link verb. Struggle against economic odds. Odds here means difficulties. We can also say overcome odds, 克服困难。For example, she has overcome enormous odds to get where she is today. 她成为今天这个样子，克服了巨大的困难。There has been a very popular song named Against All Odds. 克服所有困难，不顾一切。They suddenly became the parents of quintuplets an event which radically changed their lives. An event here refers to the former part of the sentence. Which radically changed their lives. Radically means dramatically, greatly. For example, he introduced some radically new ideas to us. 一些非常激进的新观点。Her views are not radically different from mine. Radically are not too much different from mine. Communication has changed radically as a result of the internet. Has changed drastically. 非常巨大的改变。Television cameras and newspapers carried the news. Carry here means broadcast or print. 指的是新闻界的报道传播。For example, this morning's newspapers all carry the same story on their front page. 今天早上的报纸头版都是这条消息。The exclusive rights to publish stories and photographs. The exclusive rights to publish stories and photographs. Exclusive 这里是指独家报道或者出版的权利。We'll look at the usage of exclusive with these examples. Exclusive use or access 专门使用。For example, this reading room is for the exclusive use of teachers, which means only teachers can use this reading room. Exclusive report or interview or coverage 都是跟课文里一样，专门或者独家报道的意思。For example, tune in to our exclusive coverage of Wimbledon. 请收听或者收看我们对温布尔登的独家转播。Gifts poured in. To pour in means to flow in or come in large amount. 源源而来。For example, offers of help poured in from all over the world. 援助从世界各地滚滚而来。Reporters kept pressing for interviews. Press for something means keep asking for something or keep demanding for something. For example, the company is pressing me for a decision on their offer. 公司催促我决定是否接受他们的工作。The police officer pressed the witness to identify the man she had seen. 警官催促证人指认这个见过的人。Lastly, we'll talk about how to handle repetitions. 那么文章中要避免重复有很多方式，我们来看看这篇课文是怎么做的。Newspapers exert such tremendous influence that they can not only bring about major changes, but can even overthrow a government. 这个呢是比较惯用的 not only but also 的用法 also 可以省略，它们后边接的成分是并列的。Gifts poured in not only from unknown people, but from baby food and soap manufacturers. 这里后边就省略了 gifts poured also from baby food and soap manufacturers. 所以使用 not only but also 可以省略相同的一些成分。Though we may enjoy reading about the lives of others, it is extremely doubtful whether we would equally enjoy reading about ourselves. 用 equally 就省略了 whether we would enjoy reading about lives of ourselves. Instead of being 5 new family members, these children had immediately become a commodity. Instead of 用来省略 these children had not become 5 new family members. Instead, they had become a commodity. Now we know from our own experience that the text is not exaggerating about this family's fate. We have heard about or read about such things happening on mass media in China as well. Now, with the rapidly developing IT technology, the internet has become a new force in mass media, so that the power of the press has become bigger and bigger. It can almost be described as universal. You can say it is good for social progress because it's good for passing on information more quickly. But every coin has two sides. The basic requirement for news report or for the press is to find something new. New both in terms of time and content, which means it needs to be unusual and recent. But how can it be possible for you to have so many new things in every day? So that we can understand exaggeration is inevitable. If driven by commercial interest, then there is the danger of losing objectivity, while objectivity is the most important standard for news report and the press. Okay, so much on this topic. I'll see you next time.